Good evening and welcome to the Stockboard's meeting, October 12th, 2023. And we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we did have a special permit hearing, but that is withdrawn.
Yes, we've received a request to withdraw the application for the amended special permit of Jane Airedale, 106 Interlaken Road in Stockbridge. After reviewing it with the architect, with the building inspector, the special permit that they have right now allows them to build the structure that they have with habitable space. Sorry, habitable space above it, which therefore there was a restriction in the original special permit, which said that they couldn't have an ADU, no kitchen. But that is not what they're proposing, so therefore there is no requirement for a special permit. I know Brent White is on right now. I don't know if you want to say anything else, Brent, about it, but the building inspector sees that he can issue the building permit as is without needing to do any amendment or changes.
Okay.
I'd like to take a moment to thank you, Teresa and Commissioner Colma, for your time earlier today to review the application in greater detail and come to this conclusion. And I'd like to thank the board for your consideration of the application. Although we have withdrawn it this evening, I do appreciate the time that you spent reviewing it prior to this evening. Thank you all.
Oh, you're welcome.
So it's been withdrawn. There's no other action needed to be taken.
Thank you.
Have a
Okay,
great day. Thanks again.
you're welcome. Tax classification hearing. You're up.
Good evening, everyone. So we're at that moment during the tax season where the tax classification hearing has to take place. Our valuations have been set for fiscal year 24. Our new growth has been accepted, and the next step is for tonight's meeting. I'm here to present the official tax classification hearing for fiscal year 2024. Tonight's hearing is to select a residential factor, which will determine if the town will have a split tax rate between the residential class and the commercial, industrial, and personal property classes. I'm also here to present information for the Board of Selectmen to decide on whether the town should adopt a residential exemption and a small commercial exemption. So there is a packet that I prepared, and I'm just going to refer to the page numbers that are up on the screen. I'll just read this little blurb about the shifting of the burden. The selectmen can decide to shift the tax rate up to 150%. If you do not shift the burden, it must create a residential factor, or if you do shift the burden, it must create a residential factor that is no lower than the town's historic factor. The charts that follow, page 3, list group 1, 2, and 3. Group 1 are our actual values that have been certified on the LA4 that was submitted to the DOR. And it lists the residential, the commercial, industrial, personal property. Our total valuation for all of those is $1,259,608,957. The group 2 are the actual percentages of the fair and full cash value percents. Notice that the residential percent is 90.4632 of our levy, and the commercial, industrial, personal property is a total of 9.5, or roughly around 9.54%. Our in group 3 actually shows our historic low percentage and the lowest residential factor that we've had historically. We're estimating a tax levy of $9,283,318. Page 4 is actually printed from the DOR's website on the gateway, which shows that if the select board were to adopt a shift in the tax rate, what the estimated levy amounts, shares would be, and the estimated tax rates broken down, and that goes from a residential factor of 1 all the way up to the maximum of 1.5 or 150%. I will go just quickly talk about where we're estimating the tax rate to be. If the residential factor of 1 is adopted, that will keep the tax rate at a single rate for all of the classes of property. And what we're estimating for fiscal year 24, and again, this is an estimate, there is a possibility that it could change when we submit the final tax rate, but typically it's only around a few pennies if that does change. Last year's valuation on or tax rate was $8.14 per 1,000 of value. And we're estimating this year a tax rate of $7.37 per 1,000 of value. So that is the part about the shifting of the tax rate. There are other 2 options that the select board can adopt. That is a residential exemption and a small commercial exemption. And I'm going to talk about the residential exemption on page 6.
Oh, we could also look at the commercial.
Right, well, the shifting of the shifting of the tax rate?
No, I did have a question on commercial versus residential.
Oh,
Now's a good time.
definitely.
Do you know in the last 2 or 3 years what the residential percentage has been compared to the commercial percentage?
It's always hovered around 90 and 10%.
Well, it was in the 80s, I think, last year, and it's gone up.
If anything, it was around 89%.
Right.
Yeah, so it's not, I mean, we may pick up a few, changes in the commercial class that will adjust that, but we don't have anything in our new growth where we've actually picked up anything major in our commercial class. So it's always hovered around 10, 11%.
Right, but I mean, the point I'm making is that in the last 2 years, the commercial has been flat in terms of price, in terms of assessments. Whereas
Last year, we had a few changes because of a few commercial sales, but typically there are not a
But
lot of
property-
commercial sales in Stockbridge.
No, but property to property,
Yes,
there's been relatively no change in assessment on the commercial class.
right. The only changes that you typically see on the commercial and industrial class are depreciation changes, or if they've taken out building permit to do minor work.
And I'm just wondering if the assessors evaluated whether the fact that that we've seen double-digit increases now for the second year and significant increases before that, whether that implicit shift in actual tax burden to the residential class versus where the commercial class is that something you guys talked about?
No, we don't typically talk about that because we don't see, our job as assessors is to take the sales that have occurred within a certain class and make the market adjustments for that class, and where the values come in that class is where they come in. That's what we're doing to satisfy the state's requirements for their certification standards. And because we're always hovering around the 90 and 10, 11% on the other side, they've never ever suggested that there should be or recommended a shift in the tax burden, because there really is nothing in the commercial side that can basically handle that kind of shift. And actually, if you look at the tables for the shifts, it really isn't going to create that much of a difference in the tax rates unless you literally go up to the 150%, which is almost unheard of in a town that has such a small commercial base.
Okay. The point I'm making is that in terms of actual checks that you're writing in the last 2 years, our commercial properties have seen a decline of about 20%, because as the residential amount balloons and the commercial amount is flat, then what you end up with is the burden ends up being, because one is flat and the other's not, some people are getting kind of a tax increase and others are getting tax decrease. And it just, I'm not suggesting that we take action on it this year, but I think it's something that we should be aware of, Okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay, so I'm gonna talk about, I did 2 different percentages on the residential exemption. starting on page 6, just briefly go through the two different percentages. So the residential exemption is one of 3 options. Actually, in Stockbridge, it's one of 2 options. The open space discount is not used here because our open space valuations are part of our residential class. So it's one of 2 options that may be adopted by the Board of Selectmen during the tax classification process before setting the town's tax rate. If adopted, the residential exemption may be up to 35% of the average assessed value of all residential properties. That is not the same as the average residential valuation for a single family home. That is actually the amount of all the residential class to come up with an average. A residential exemption applies to every residential property which is the principal residence of a taxpayer. The residential exemption does not apply to accessory land, incidental, or to a residential use, second homes, or to a residential property not occupied by its owner. This would include rental properties. In addition, the application of the exemption may not reduce the taxable value of the property to less than 10% of its full and fair cash value. And what I did, this is basically, again, taken from the DOR's Gateway site, which we use to send everything in for the classification, setting of the tax rate, and the valuations. And so you take your total assessed valuation divided by your total residential parcel count to come up with the average residential value, which is 600. And now again, this is, for this purpose, it is the total average residential value, 671,074. That is what we're coming up with. After this, if you were to implement, let's say 20%, that 671,000 is multiplied by the 20% to come up with a residential exemption of 134,215. What this amount is the amount that would come off of every eligible parcel. And once this is done, what we have to do is we actually have to readjust the tax rate because 134,215 is still in the levy, but we have to take the number of parcels that we think are eligible, which we've come up with 660 parcels. It's an estimate. It's a very rough estimate, seeing that the determination of residency is more involved than just looking at the mailing address on the property owner's tax bill. It's more of a lengthy process. The residential exemption, and again, we're using 134,215, is multiplied by the eligible parcels. Again, we're using 660 to determine how much value is taken from the total residential class and dispersed to the second homeowners and renters who would not qualify for the exemption. It's still part of the levy, it's just being dispersed differently, which is going to generate a different tax rate than what we're proposing. So on page 7, we're proposing a tax rate that's $7.37. If a 20% residential exemption were to be adopted, that new residential tax rate would be recalculated to $7.99. This would be an increase of 62 cents over the rate that is being estimated at $7.37 for fiscal year 24. It would be an overall decrease in the tax rate of 15 cents from the fiscal year 2023 to fiscal year 2024 tax rate. That's the 20%. And and again, it can be within that range, but I also, for this meeting, did a 35% as well, and that's on page 8. Basically the same instructions on how to calculate. We're still coming up with the same average residential value of 671,074. But now we're using 35% against the 671.74 to come up with a residential exemption amount that's 234,876. Again, this amount would be taken off of every eligible parcel, which again, we're coming up with an estimate of 660 parcels that would be eligible. And on page 9, that number against the 660 would be 155 million that again would have to be readjusted in the levy and readjust the residential tax rate. The new tax rate would be estimated at 853 instead of the 737. That would be $1.16 increase over the 737, and it would be an overall increase in the tax rate from last year of 39 cents. That's pretty much it in the residential exemption. The final option that the select board has to vote on is the small commercial exemption. The small commercial exemption is one of three options, again, one of two options that may be adopted by the Board of Selectmen during the tax classification process. If adopted, the small commercial exemption may be up to 10% of the assessed value of each eligible Class 3 commercial property. A small commercial exemption applies to Class 3 commercial properties that are occupied by businesses with an average employment of no more than 10 people and an assessed value of less than 1 million. For a business to qualify, the director of the Department of Workforce Development must certify that it had an average annual employment of 10 or fewer people at all locations during the preceding calendar year. A list is provided to the Board of Assessors on an annual basis for those that may qualify. And we actually go through that list and eliminate the ones that are in properties that are over $1 million in valuation. We're basically doing that right before the tax classification hearing because that list just came out. So the calculation for that on page 10, you take the total commercial class, which is 5,380,800. And again, there's only one calculation for this because the maximum allowed is 10%. And you come up with a total value to be exempt, that's 538,000, which would come off of any eligible commercial property with 10 people as employees or 10 people or less and $1 million in valuation or less. And again, because you're giving an exemption, that amount in the tax levy has to be adjusted. So there's going to be an adjustment to the tax rate. And we're calculating that on page, well, it's still on page 10 on the bottom. The new commercial rate using the above numbers would be recalculated at $7.43. This would be an increase in 6 cents over the rate that is being estimated at $7.37. Adopting a small commercial exemption in a way creates a shift in the tax rate because the residential rate is going to remain the same at $7.37. But because you're adopting a commercial rate and you're moving the levy around within that class in order to make up for it, the tax rate for the commercial class has to change. And it wouldn't be a huge increase. It would be a 6 cent increase over last year's rate of $7.37. The small commercial exemption would have a very small impact on those parcels that are eligible, even using the highest exemption amount allowed by law. And an important note on page 11, note 2, the reduction in taxes does not go back to the small business. It only benefits the owner of the commercial property. That is.
And the maximum is 10% on that?
10%.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And that is all of the options. And that is again, a residential adopting, not splitting the tax rate and keeping it the way it's historically been, would be an adoption of a residential factor of 1. That would be what you would be voting on. And then the other two options are the residential exemption and the small commercial exemption.
I'm going to ask one more question on the small commercial.
Yeah.
Are any of the 8 parcels you listed currently empty storefronts
There are a few that are listed.
that are empty?
Yeah, I don't have the list, but there are at least 2.
At least 2 are empty.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is this, and I've gotten some calls on this, is for 6 cents on the rate, should we consider the small commercial exemption just because it might make it slightly more affordable, reducing taxes 10%, it might be something to think about, but just because we've had some problem filling, like what you see the Yankee Candle Shop. I've heard, one of the banks may be moving, I don't know. The bank might be too valuable, but,
It goes to the person owning the building, which they live everywhere else. So they're not gonna take,
Yeah, but,
they're not gonna change the rent or anything.
no, but most of the commercial leases, like, the Berkshire Waldorf where I work, the commercial lease passes through the taxes as part of the lease to the tenant. So actually, the tenant does benefit. It's a standard part of a commercial lease is that the taxes are paid by the tenant. So it would effectively just have a slight reduction in the rent to maybe try to fill those places. Yeah, I'm not sure it's a great idea. I'm just bringing it up because we're supposed to bring up these things.
Then that would be passed on to the other businesses that are above 10.
All of us, 6 cents.
Well,
No, only the commercial.
Only the
It's
commercial.
only a shift within the commercial class only.
so that'll be putting the burden on the bigger businesses and making them pay more.
Right, and again, it creates its own split tax rate. You have to still, the residential, nothing would change.
Yeah.
So the 737 would apply to the residential, the adjustment would be in the commercial class. If you're giving an exemption within a particular class, the dispersion of the levy is still gonna be within that class.
Right. Then in that case, I'd like it better because frankly, the larger commercial tenants have seen a net decrease in taxes of about 20% in the last 2 years because their assessments are flat and the residential assessments are up over 2 years, well over 25%. So their taxes are still way below, even with that shift, their taxes would still be way below what they were 2 years ago.
Michael, what is the tax rate in Great Barrington?
I have no idea.
It's in the teens or 20s or 30s.
It's
What's the
15.
tax
I
rate?
think 14 or 15,
17.
16.
17.
I know they're a lot higher than they are here.
And the tax rate in Lee? Anybody know?
It's
The
higher,
tax rate in Lennox?
higher.
Way higher.
I don't know if this is my time to speak because you're still standing in that rostrum, but I would like your input. I was just driving around today because I'm sort of semi-retired, which I've heard is like being semi-pregnant, but anyway. I was looking at the individual properties that are here, some of which are empty. I mean, you got the Levan Center up there, 107, and you got other stuff going on. And it seems to me as though Stockbridge is turning into not a residential community, but a big hotel. And now, if that is the case, the people who are going to take a beating, I mean, my taxes went up, or my assessed value went up 10%. I could give a damn about it, frankly. You know, I pay my taxes because I like Stockbridge. I don't understand a couple of things. We are a tourism economy, whether it is Stockbridge, Great Barrington, Lennox, or whatever. COVID came around, you know, there was great exodus from New York, and everybody decided to come up here and put cash on the table. You got a piece of property for sale for $250,000. Well, it starts a bidding war. Okay, I'll give you $200,000 for that. Go figure. This is the burden that us people who are residents here are putting up with. So number one, if the residential tax, the residential exemption tax doesn't get implemented. Number two, if a tax split isn't made between the people who are making money off of all of these tourists that are coming up, and incidentally, the chamber funds part of the marketing budget for the Chamber of Commerce downstairs that brings these people here along with the Berkshire Visitors Bureau, whatever the hell it's called these days. I'm sorry. I am sorry. I knew your dad very well, and if he were sitting in this room right now, he would agree with me. And if you think that we're going to cause any revolution like the Gaza Strip or something like that in Stockbridge, I'm sorry, you're not. It's a fact of the matter. Provincetown, what happened in Provincetown? People in Provincetown had to leave. I'm sorry, what'd you say there, Mr. McCown?
I was asking a question.
She just asked a question.
People had to leave the town who'd been there and move 20 miles down the Cape in order to come up 20 miles to maintain their fishing boat. Come on. This is happening here. We're talking about affordable housing, and we've got all of these, we got this empty space up here on Rattlesnake, or corner of Rattlesnake and Route 7. Guy paid $100,000 for it. He has realized, in the meantime, that he came up with a pariah. If the town were to offer him $105,000, he'd probably be glad to get rid of it. And you know what? Yes, the housing trust, whatever it is, would have to make a major investment into turning that into apartments for people who can afford to live here. Now, this is the quandary that we're up against. Lennox has got a higher tax rate, and they also have a split tax rate, I might add. I don't know about lease, but a split rate are the same. But, you know, I would say every single solitary thing that comes to the advantage of people who live in this town permanently should be put on the table and instituted. And I am done.
Okay.
Okay, so what do we do? Take the vote?
Now we gotta close the hearing, don't we?
Wait,
Is there
yeah, you
For
can,
people.
and if there's any.
Yeah, any questions
comment
from-
on the hearing?
in here or no?
I have a question on the
Name?
Shirley Miller, 2 Elm Street. On the residential, you gave two figures on the rate on the residential. One was the minimum raise and one was the maximum. And the minimum raise only raises the taxes on the second homeowners a very small percentage, right?
No, they both do.
Huh?
They both do.
They both do.
They both do.
Yeah, any percentage on the residential exemption, whether it was 1% or 35%, is only gonna apply to someone that can prove their domicile in Stockbridge. It is not for renters and it's not for second homeowners. That's what we have to do, that 660 number that I threw out. That's basically an estimate of how many residents would qualify for that.
Qualify for the, you know, but as if it goes through, and you said that what my understanding is that the amount that our taxes would be decreased, that money, the amount of money has to be applied to the higher,
Yeah, it has to be,
it applies.
the town has to raise a certain amount for the tax levy in order to function. So that is just gonna be redispersed, and what it's gonna do is it's going to take the tax rate that we have, that we're estimating it, and it's going to bring it up in order to make up for that difference.
It doesn't bring it up significantly.
Well, not significantly, but it will bring it up for everybody. So even those that get the exemption would still be, you still might be paying less, but you're still gonna be paying on that higher tax rate.
Right,
And
right.
so won't the ones that don't receive it.
Right,
It applies across the board,
okay.
regardless of what percentage is adopted.
Whether there's a residential tax exemption or not, my taxes will go up. And I don't really care. But I think in fairness to the people who can afford, what I read in that list of people and everything that they pay and what their assessed values were and what their, assessed values for 24 are going to be and what they're going to end up with the percentage of increase is going to be, it's absurd, Michael.
It's not absurd.
It is absurd.
There is a huge amount of properties that are actually gonna have a very minimal increase with a tax rate of $7.37. The calculation is there.
$7.37 is nothing.
It is not, exactly, that's what we're saying, that is a great tax
You pay
rate.
what they gotta pay down there and you're hurting.
But we want a lower tax rate here against a higher value.
Right,
That's
right.
gonna create a difference in your tax bill.
I understand that. It's a great sales point for the realtors. That's about it.
So
Okay, any other questions?
if I can,
Yeah,
so a couple bits of information, John, I looked up the tax bills for, the tax rates for communities. This is 2023, because not every town has 2024. Great Barrington has an average tax bill.
I don't want to know the tax bill, I want to know the tax rate.
Oh, all right. So
14.
I can get that up and that. I didn't realize, because the tax rate tells you very little.
Well, no, the tax rate tells you a lot. If you're Michelle Martin who's on Laurel Street down there, who's.
No, your tax bill tells you what you're paying.
Right.
So an example is there's communities that have as low as $3 tax rates, yet have tax bills that are well in excess of $20,000.
Right.
So therefore, a tax rate can mean very little. You can have a community that has a $44 commercial tax rate where a property has a lower tax bill than in a community where the tax rate is $14.
I understand this.
So,
I understand.
yeah, so I can look that up if you give me a moment. I can look up the tax bill, or if you want to know what the average tax bill is in the surrounding, that's up to you guys. We did run an analysis of how many properties would see a tax reduction and how many would see a tax increase. So out of our total tax bills, we have 984 properties that would see a decrease in their tax bill. And then we have another
700.
500, about 550 that would see a tax bill increase of less than $100. And then the remaining properties, which is about 400, would see a tax increase. So that's the current split on that.
I guess.
That's common, right?
I guess my point here is that the perception of the voters in this town who are residents is that the select board is divided, and it's divided in favor of the second homeowners. Now, no, you can say what you want to say and I'll listen to it. But I mean, the fact of the matter is that frankly, most of them are arrogant. That's all I'll say.
okay. Anybody on Zoom, anything to say? Seeing none, I'm gonna close the public hearing.
I'll close the evidentiary portion.
Close the evidentiary portion of the
Yes.
public hearing.
And now
I
you.
don't have my cheat sheet.
I'm sorry, for the board now to deliberate and then make its decisions on the split and then decisions on whether you're gonna use the residential tax exemption and the small commercial.
Okay. You want to say anything, Peter?
Yeah, I've got a brief statement. We still have a well-rounded community. We have 13 employees of the school district living in Stockbridge and around 10 employees, town employees. We all know nurses and landscapers and farmers and plumbers and electricians who still live here. And looking out the crowd, I'm going to add restaurant workers and museum workers. Let me recount a story from last weekend. One of our merchants had a problem with the sewer connection. He texted me, I texted Mike Buffoni, who contacted Mark Biola, who works in the sewer department, who was on call. And in 5 minutes, I got a response. And in 15 minutes, Mark was on site troubleshooting the sewer downtown. These guys are awesome, by the way. This was only possible because these guys are local. On questions of housing policy and tax policy and the ability for local jobs to be held by local folks, especially around public safety and infrastructure, we simply must ensure we keep a robust and well-rounded community. And yet most of the folks like these that I know are in their 50s or older. Where's the next generation of folks to replace them? Will they be able to afford to live here? In 2000, the tax rate was around $10 and the median house price was $235,000. creating an average tax bill of around $2,350. In 2024, with the 737 rate and a median house price of around 750,
The average,
670, 671, right?
671, they'll create a tax bill of around $5,000. From 2000 to 2023, median income has stayed the same at 45,000. Taxes are up well over 200%, while income has remained flat over the last 23 years. The residential tax exemption is one of about a dozen tools we can use to address the unprecedented challenges we face to maintain a well-rounded community. I don't believe it is a choice. I believe we should be looking at all of them. You know, I've been working closely with town council and town administrators to minimize the Houstonic Waterworks proposed rate increase in the Furnace District. This is how I work to address the challenges our homeowners face and one of the many tools I use to do so. The residential exemption is another of these tools. The assessor reports to us that there are just 660 homes owned by residents, representing less than 40% of all households. Some communities on the Cape waited until it was 25% of all households. I wouldn't recommend that because I've talked with leaders in Provincetown and Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard and Newport. Communities like these have reached a level of dysfunction because they have no places for folks to live, no workers to fill the jobs. We can't wait until it is too late. And with that, I support a residential tax exemption at 35%. However, there's a compromise here. We can adopt a residential tax exemption at a smaller percentage. We can adopt it anywhere between nothing and 35%. In fact, the assessor gave us the analysis for a 20% exemption. When coupled with the extraordinarily low budget increase this year of just 1%, that would not create an undue burden, and in fact would keep the non-residential tax increase in line with many other Berkshire communities. I know some of you oppose this. There's been a petition, there's been letters, there's been public comments. I've been equally candid about my positions. In a year, we had a record voter turnout, an overwhelming majority understood what I was saying and supported my positions. We don't want the marketplace to destroy a well-rounded community. I have no desire to overburden our seasonal residents. I just want us to work together to maintain the community we have against the tidal wave of changes that we face. And with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. So we'll do
So we need a vote of adopting, if you're gonna adopt a single tax rate, or if you're gonna have a shift between your commercial, industrial.
right, so residential
I'll
tax.
make the motion that we approve the residential factor of 1.
I'll second.
This is
This is just the factor, then we get to the residential tax exemption and then the small commercial.
All those in favor?
aye.
Aye.
I don't have my cheat sheet.
Tell me what you just voted on, I didn't get it.
We voted on the residential factor of 1.
So
Commercial versus
everybody has to set single tax rate.
Yes, and now they're gonna go to the exemptions. to
Right.
vote those.
Okay, but that was the single thing,
Yeah,
okay.
Okay, then it's the,
Choice
residential,
of commercial or RT.
or both.
We have to do both.
You can do both.
yeah.
You can vote on each of them. If there's, yeah.
So the motion for the RTE.
I'll make a motion at 35%. Out a second, I make a motion at 20%, which I consider the compromise.
No, I'm not second.
What's that?
No. So
Someone has to make a motion.
Yeah.
we'll make a motion at 20%.
He made a motion at 20%, not seconded. Now you can make a motion to not adopt. You can make a motion to set it at a percentage. It's up to you guys.
Okay, I'll make a motion, I'm just on my cheat sheet, so it's,
Just
Want me to-
not to adopt
Either.
or adopt a percentage for the RT. So Patrick's made two that weren't seconded.
Okay.
If you're not considering the RT, then a motion not to adopt.
I'll make a motion that we don't adopt the RTE.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Short,
Now you have to
The
do
next-
the small commercial.
small commercial exemption. I'll make a motion.
Okay, you too.
I'll make a motion that we do not accept
May I
the small.
May I say something?
Meeting's
No, it's
closed.
closed.
To make a motion that we do not accept a small business.
The small commercial exemption, yeah.
I would make it, I think we should consider it's only 6 cents on the tax rate and 2 out of these 8 properties are empty. And it's a pass through to help save rent. I think we should consider the small business exemption. And I'll make a motion, an alternate, well, I don't know how to do that, but I will vote no on that one also and would favor the small business exemption.
I'll second it.
For what?
The small commercial.
Oh, excellent. Do you want to talk about it, sir? Change your mind?
So the small commercial exemption, so anybody under 10 employees,
Right.
Or $1
There's a
million.
list that comes through and from the state. And
They have to have $1 million.
yeah, the valuation cannot be more than $1 million. It does not go back to the business, it goes to the owner.
yeah,
Yes, and I'll also say that the Board of Assessors does not recommend this. There's such a small amount of commercial property, they don't see the benefit in it.
Yeah, I would dispute that as the CFO of a nonprofit that rents property in Stockbridge and pays the full amount of taxes on that building. I will tell you, I do not agree with that assessment, Mike. I'm just saying. But
well, does every renter pay the tax?
well, I mean, it's a standard part of a commercial lease. I don't know if every person has it in their commercial lease. I know we do.
And the Board of Assessors was against it.
But 2 out of the 8 properties are empty and only affects 8 properties. It's a relatively small.
But where
6 cents.
does that increase? So they lose 6, where's the rest, who makes up that money?
It's all within the commercial class.
So what? So that will go on to there would be a raise onto other commercial.
Well, the tax rate would be different for just the commercial class. It doesn't go to the residential.
What was the tax rate last year?
$8.14.
So their taxes, their assessments are flat. That means the same as last year. Last year, their rate was 811. Even with this, their rate goes down to 743. They're already seeing a huge reduction in their taxes because their assessments didn't go up.
But
So it's whether you wanted to go down to 737 or 743.
6 cents.
Yeah, there's this, it's page, I forget which page it is, but right, it's 743, it's 6 cents.
737 versus 743.
It's still a decrease.
It's a huge decrease,
to the whole entire
yeah.
commercial class.
But where does that money get made up?
Only on the other commercial businesses
There's no makeup.
that are greater than.
It's
It's
not
gotta be
really
made
a
up somewhere.
There's no makeup. It goes from 811 to 743 or 811 to 737. That's the makeup. It's for everybody.
6 cents, but it doesn't, it's not like a loss.
Yeah. They're either getting,
If you don't adopt the residential, if you don't adopt the commercial, every commercial property will be at 737.
Yeah,
If you adopt the commercial, there'll be,
Small
Mike is
commercial.
approximating that 6 businesses would be able to,
8.
properties,
Eight.
8 would be able to benefit from this. Therefore, the tax rate would be $7.43 for all the remaining properties. So it does slightly increase the commercial rate, but overall, the commercial rate would be going from 814 down to either 843 or down to 743 or
811, 811 to 7.
Yeah, the way the board looks at it is that it's the difference in the tax rate between 737 and 743 on an established class where the valuations have really not changed is not worth doing.
But worth is a judgment call, Michael, and it's up to the judgment of this board. I'm just saying,
Well,
2 out of the 8 businesses are empty.
I'm giving you the recommendation.
That's not a recommendation.
That's right. This is not my recommendation. This is the Board of Assessors' recommendation.
Okay.
Right now, Chuck, you have a motion and a second to approve the small commercial
I
exemption.
don't know if I'm just not getting it. If you change in the tax rate,
8 properties would get a tax decrease and the rest of them would now have a tax rate of 743 instead of 737.
So,
But overall, they're still seeing a significant decrease from the
Yeah.
previous year, which was
from last
814.
year.
Okay,
But there's also 36 properties in the commercial class and only 8 of those would get a reduction.
I was thinking, I mean, would it hurt another business that was,
No. Because,
it wouldn't?
no, because it's down from last
Still
year.
Okay. That's what I don't want this pushed onto businesses that are just getting by that are on that threshold. You know what I'm saying?
All that.
What's that?
I just know a business is very tight in this town, you know, people to,
Again,
Both of them
it's not a huge difference. It's not going to make a big difference if this is adopted. The commercial class is just so small and the valuations have not changed. So that's where the Board of Assessors is coming from. To implement something like this on 8 properties instead of 36 properties, where 36 properties are gonna be getting any more of a change, even if it's slight, that's where they're coming from.
But we also have like, 2 of these are empty and some, we've had empty storefronts for some time now and, and this is a simple way to address that. And I think, well, yeah. It doesn't, it's not like we're raising their taxes. Their taxes are going to go from lower to even lower. Depends on which one we do.
okay, let's take a vote on it. Patrick?
Yes. Aye.
Yes.
Okay.
Are we done?
So now we close it?
Yep.
Close.
Take action on change of officers and director application for Once Upon a Table.
You enjoyed your time on the Board of Selectmen because you're gone.
Melissa?
Thank you, Michael.
It's Michael.
You're welcome.
So was the Gaza.
Hi.
So was the Israel comment.
Okay,
Hi.
I am removing Nelco Lindsay.
Your name.
Oh, my name is Abernil Maloney.
I'm Nixon St. Bernard.
I manage and operate the 19 months in Once Upon a Table. And I am appointing Nixon St. Bernard to be the alcohol manager for the restaurant and removing Nelco Lindsay, who's been in, she's moving away, so need to put someone else.
Okay.
And this is Mr. Nixon St. Bernard.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we accept the change.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I hope to see you all soon.
Thank you.
Come in winter.
Great smash burgers. Bring it back.
Bring it back
Hey.
January.
Appoint Catherine Mahoney to the Council on Aging Board.
Second. Oh,
I'll make a motion that we appoint her to the board.
second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
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 Take action on one-day alcohol license for Birch Botanical Garden for October 21st from 6 to 11 and November 4th from 6 to 11.
Make a motion to approve?
Second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Future of community media as we face declining cable subscriptions and pending legislation S34-H74 and Act to modernize funding for community access centers. What is that about?
Rich is going to.
Good evening,
Hi, Rich.
Stockbridge
How are you?
Select Board. Good evening, Stockbridge residents. Thank you for having me here tonight. Usually I'm on the other side of the camera. We're back at the studio. Tonight I have a short PowerPoint.
You just tell them what your name is, Rich.
Oh, yes. My name is Richard Frederick. I'm the Executive Director for Community Television for the Southern Berkshires. And I have a short PowerPoint to present to you tonight about the future of CTSB, about declining cable subscriptions, and pending legislation. So my first slide is the importance of community television for the Southern Berkshires. I could talk to you probably for 2 hours about this, but I need to move on to other things. So CTSB serves Lee, Lenox, Stockbridge, Great Barrington, and Sheffield. Our 3 cable channels, 1301, 1302, and 1303, are funded by roughly 6,500 cable subscribers who reside in the 5 towns. CTSB records town and school board meetings, community events, sports, parades, our annual Fall Festival of Shakespeare, which involves high schools, and so much more. Again, I could talk about that all night, but that's not why I'm here. CTSB also serves vulnerable and marginalized populations in our community, such as the elderly, students with disabilities, and non-English speaking communities. We are a vital service to your community. CTSB provides the community a voice on such important issues as PCB contamination. So why now? Why are we talking about this now? So there's a major technology shift. And the technology is changing the way we view television. Streaming video is replacing traditional cable TV boxes along with CTSB's current funding model. CTSB will suffer drastic funding losses now that Spectrum has made the Xumo Stream box available, and it will severely impact services provided by CTSB. Massachusetts is proposing a 5% streaming tax legislation on companies like Disney, Hulu, Netflix, and Spectrum to support community television moving forward. Senate Bill 34 and House Bill 74 needs to be passed by February of 2024. This act is called an Act to Modernize Funding for Community Media Programming. And to date, this legislation has received testimony. Back in June, it received testimony from community access stations from all over the state. Massachusetts has 210 community TV stations, more than anywhere in the world. So we have the most to lose. Back in June, when the testimony was given, we heard from the access stations across the state and also from people who represent us in public policy. And I thought one of the most powerful quotes from the testimony given on Beacon Hill was from Mike Wassenaar, the president of the Alliance for Community Media. And I'll quote, "If this bill is not signed into law, we will be back in 2 years to discuss closures and layoffs, period," unquote. So we really need your support. As the next couple of years, we could face severe funding losses. So how can the towns and residents help us out? We need your support to continue offering full CTSB services to your community. We would ask that you send a letter to state and federal representatives expressing your concern and support for Massachusetts Bill S34 and H74. Letters should be sent by your town and residents. Many letters are needed immediately and should be sent no later than October 31st. Letters can be sent to Governor Maura Healey, Senator Paul Mark, Representative William Smitty Pignatelli, and Representative Tricia Farley Bouvier. CTSB will continue to update you on Mass Bills S34 and H74. And I thank you for your time and support this evening. And just one more thing I wanted to mention about this legislation is how it would be allocated if it was to pass. So if it was to pass, 2/5 would go to community access centers, 2/5 would go to municipalities, and 1/5 would go to the state of Massachusetts general fund. So I think the municipalities have a lot to gain as well by having this legislation, which is taxing streaming companies who are making billions of dollars streaming across your lawn and everyone's front lawn in the 5 towns. So any questions?
Are you projecting a deficit this year? I'm sorry, is that okay? Yeah. Are you projecting a deficit for this fiscal year?
For 2024, we receive our checks in the middle of March, and I'm not really predicting a loss for next year because this has been a full year of the Zumo box is just being unveiled at Walmart this fall. So I don't think cable subscribers are going to have a chance.
There's already been some attrition in cable supplies.
Right. We're losing subscriptions all the time. Last year we were pretty consistent, and I feel with all the extra homeowners up here now that I feel confident about next March, but it's March of 2025 where I really feel concerned. After a year and a half of the Zumo box rollout, and people switch, each subscriber that we lose, that's 5%. Of that month's cable bill. So I'm really worried about the spring of 2025.
And I CC'd you on, I had a conversation with the Director of Rural Affairs on this topic that I CC'd you on, and she actually brought it up at today's Rural Affairs. They have a weekly check-in. It's really kind of interesting if you guys if you guys are interested. But she does a weekly call, and there were about 70 people on it today, and this came up as a topic of conversation with the town managers and others that were on that call today. So I think it's starting to get some traction because, you know, in a place like Berkshire County, I mean, as great as our local papers are, you know, there's not always a lot of column inches to cover every single topic. And so many people get the information from Zoom. And in a community of second homeowners even, you know, a lot of folks have to be able to Zoom in or if they want to watch it after the meeting is over, you know, there's no Zoom without CTSV or no easy way to do it like we do it now. And so dealing, you know, the point I made today was just we've got 2 years to figure this out and they seem to be paying attention. So hopefully we'll, you know.
Government transparency and so many things that, you know, freedom of speech. I will say that a similar bill in 2022 failed.
Yeah.
So we're very concerned.
I'm just curious about one thing. So Verizon, would you be taxing Verizon? Would this include Verizon, AT&T?
No, I believe it's just people who are selling video services. So anyone in the streaming business, and now that would include Spectrum as they begin to stream.
Yeah.
The same cable subscriptions on the same providers.
So I'm going to say something that maybe people don't agree with. You know, adding taxation to Disney, Hulu, Netflix, don't quite understand that personally. Spectrum, Verizon, AT&T. So if you look at the demographics of under 30, the number one way they're watching videos and others is on phones. Also, traditional ones, even Disney, Hulu, and them are shedding viewers because places like YouTube, Twitter, that's going to long form video and the rest are free. Now they make their money by subscribers and advertising. So why does this bill not hit? Why is the focus on just those instead of hitting all the providers of internet service, Spectrum, AT&T, Verizon? It seems like that way you're capturing from everybody that's using the internet instead of just capturing from those that are, and for a lot of households that do multiple.
No, but it would.
Hulu, Netflix, they're going to pass it on.
It's not just those, it's YouTube TV. Anybody providing streaming video would be taxed under this. So it doesn't matter if it's on a phone.
I understand that, but Patrick, I know this too.
Infrastructure to.
As you go down and young, they are not buying YouTube TV. They watch YouTube.
Well, anybody who wants to watch news or sports buys a package like YouTube TV. You can't watch it otherwise.
Rich, am I wrong on the demographics moving to?
Yeah, but if YouTube isn't subscription based, I mean, it can be, but I think the idea is it's not charging people, it's not sending the tax to people's bills, it's charging them directly. They have to pay 5% of their revenue from the state of Massachusetts, each of those companies. And it may include more companies than I mentioned.
Right.
I don't truly
I'm just
know.
always concerned that the move toward, as we get bigger and bigger cell phones, tablets, and other stuff, people are moving away from regular television. And it seems like a missing piece here is that I'm a big believer that 5G and others is going to dominate in the near future. Right. And if you're going to end up in the same scenarios by going after these instead of going, I agree with Spectrum, just like we do on the cable. Yeah. But why you're not going after Verizon, AT&T, and the others who are providing the internet access? They're talking about once 5G comes, you're going to have boxes in your home that are supplying cable. So that's just mine. I'm a believer in, don't get me wrong, big supporter of community television. I just think instead of it should be the internet providers, not the.
But maybe I'm misunderstanding, but Spectrum has a monopoly in Stockbridge. Verizon has that monopoly in Boston. Wherever you're a monopoly provider of cable infrastructure, you currently pay this tax. What this would do is shift it to folks who provide movies and sports and news as a subscription model. And if anybody's watching Netflix or YouTube TV, which is for sports or whatever, everybody would pay it no matter what the platform. And I will add one other thing, which is if we could tax TikTok out of existence, I would be all for that too. I just don't see a way to do it.
Can I just say that, so it's about content.
Yes,
And
that's right.
It's content that you're taxing the services that provide content. If you
Paid
tax-
content.
What?
Paid content.
Yes. If you tax the services that provide the access to that content, I think you actually are creating a negative impact for those young people and also for people who are suffering within that digital divide. So I feel that I think it's the paid content is the thing that's effectively competing with community access here and creating that, they're strangling them out.
I guess I don't want to, I only say it different because right now we do tax Spectrum as a provider of cable. And the shift needs to be to the provider of, no, they don't, they distribute the content, so.
I'll just add that when I switch.
Town decision, but
When I switch from Spectrum to YouTube TV, my cable bill, YouTube TV costs $60-70 a month and Spectrum costs $220. And so it's the exact same channels and I save $160. So I don't feel bad about Spectrum because they're a monopolist and they charge 3 times what you can do with YouTube TV. So, I come here to bury Spectrum, not to, praise him, not to bury him. Maybe I'm the opposite.
And if the state is taxing the streamers, they should absorb the tax. They shouldn't pass it on to their viewers, because if we're not funded through the streaming tax and the municipalities have to fund us, that's going to get passed on to taxpayers, and that tax is not optional like your subscription is. So you can choose to not have a Hulu subscription, but if the municipalities have to fund us, you can't choose to not pay your taxes.
Yeah.
So the streamers who are making these billions of dollars should absorb the tax, but we know they will pass it on to the consumers.
Good. So is there any action that you want besides writing letters?
Writing letters for now, and I think I just want to have an open dialogue as to what's going on. I don't want 2 years from now, I don't want to come to you and say, well, we lost our.
If this fails, what do you envision the ask is going to be to the 5 towns? If the bill doesn't pass?
I don't know. I don't think that there would be an ask. I mean, what we're being told by the Alliance for Community Media and these people that represent us is that we need a funding model going forward, that taxpayers are not going to pay for this. And underwriting and fundraising is also not a way to support us. We're in the business of broadcasting.
I'm looking at a screen where we've got at least 2 or 3 folks who are not necessarily in Stockbridge and who are taxpayers and who have a right to this information. And I think paying 1/5 of your share of any deficit you have is absolutely, at least from my individual perspective, something this town would consider, because I don't see any way for us to run transparent government for these folks unless you exist. So I don't necessarily write off these are communities that are half remote much of the year. It's going to be really important for us to figure this out one way or the other, or else it's going to be really hard for them to participate in important decisions where they're taxpayers.
Yeah, if the 5 towns would support us, I mean, we would be more than happy, but it's not our wish to place the burden on.
May not be, but if this fails, if this bill fails, I think you should have a plan in place to fund it. And if that involves asking us, don't assume you're going to get a no.
Yeah, and that's why I'm getting out in front of this now. And after tonight, I will be presenting the same PowerPoint to the other 4 towns that we serve and make sure everyone's aware of this, because it's not being talked about in the mainstream media at all.
I do have one quick question.
Sure.
The funding that public television and public radio get from the government, does this community access not eligible for that type of funding?
No, so we're part of the Cable Act of 1984, where basically they said, in exchange for putting poles and lines in everyone's public and private ways, we're going to give you community television. And now that they're streaming over the same coax cable line, same poles, same wires, nothing's really changed. We're just not being taken along for the ride. And, if you look at 210 stations just in Massachusetts, they stretch all the way to Hawaii and Texas and Florida. If Spectrum can get rid of us, they stand to save a lot of money. They just paid Xfinity $900 million to acquire this box. So
Save them $100 to $200 million a year, just getting rid of the 210 in Massachusetts.
right.
Anyways.
Thank you.
Great, you're welcome. And I'll follow up for sure in the future and keep everyone up to date.
I know it's Mohican.
Okay, discussion on how to develop strong relationships between the Mohegan community and locals from Stockbridge. So we have,
You want to have,
Rich?
Yeah.
it's up to you.
yeah, you want to speak first?
Rich Bradway, East Main Street, I'm president of the Stockbridge Land Trust. As you know, this past year, the state awarded an MVP grant to the Stockbridge Muncie community to reacquire Fen Farm property, 351 acres on the northern tip of Monument Mountain. So now that means that the Stockbridge Muncie community will have a presence once again here in Stockbridge, not only as landowners, but also as stewards of this land. I think that an important step forward, in addition to some of the other work that's being done with respect to the transfer of the deeds to the deeds book to the Stockbridge Muncie community, the burial ground, those efforts and such. One of the things that I feel strongly about is that this community, Stockbridge, stands to benefit increasing and fostering a relationship with the Stockbridge Muncie community. I think that both communities can benefit from a mutual partnership to sort of I don't want to even use the word reconcile, but just to work together to raise up our mutual communities. And I think that in the efforts that we had with respect to assisting the community, Stockbridge Muncie community, with respect to the MVP grant, it was apparent to me, and I don't necessarily want to speak on anyone else's behalf, but I would say that people probably would step forward and agree that there was a lot of misconceptions to which how the Stockbridge Muncie community would proceed if they were to acquire land in town. A lot of things that were completely off base, really just more sort of gut responses, reactions than to really having conversations with the folks at the Stockbridge Muncie community and really understanding what their true intentions are. So I feel that it would be important for our town to, in some manner, create some sort of group of individuals, and I'll leave it to you to figure out what that structure is, but I think it's important that both communities create a partnership of people to come together to kind of work through various topics, various concerns, whether it's just about cultural awareness or even just about stewardship of the land. I feel like just being the president of the Stockbridge Land Trust and also being on the Campusa Bog Stewardship Committee, the town has a lot to benefit from working with the Stockbridge Muncie community with respect to observing and maybe learning about indigenous practices around conservation. I think that's something that we could really benefit from. So simple things like that would be a great benefit to this community. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay. So
Can I,
And at this time, Rich, is there like ongoing meetings or conversations or?
Well,
I'll go back. So, right now, we know that there are conversations happening with respect to the burial ground. And we also know that as a result of the criteria for the MVP grant, there will be conversations with respect to that specific property, conservation planning. There will be public programming associated with that to build awareness, not only about the property, but also about the community. But that's really just focused on that one property.
So who are they communicating with at this point?
okay.
Yeah.
All right, so there's already a lot of joint programming between various folks in town and the Muncie community. We've got someone from the Stockbridge Library on, and give me a moment before you correct me, but we got Talia, who's the curator. She's traveling to Wisconsin to meet with them on the library's behalf in April, I believe, of next year. She's been working with Monique Kendall, who's the Director of Cultural Affairs, writing a history for the Museum and Archives. They have a current feature of paintings and lithographs and beadwork that is currently at the library. And they're doing the display of the documents, the facsimile of the documents that we returned at the 2021 town meeting. In addition to that, Brian Crewy has got the Mohican Miles in the updated, presentation that we all, participated in launching at the barn behind the Mission House. I've also had conversations, when Shannon Halsey was here, both for the MVP announcement with the Lieutenant Governor, as well as when they came back to have the reception at Norman Rockwell. I had a chance to talk to her. She directed in real time that a woman named Sherry White be the liaison to Stockbridge. And in addition to that, suggested that we come up with a list of ideas on how we can build relationships between our communities. So as a follow-up, Michael and I had a conversation with Sherry yesterday just to get their sense of what that meant. And she loves the idea of creating I don't want to put words in her mouth, she seems supportive of the idea of creating some kind of a working group between some representatives of the town and some folks in the tribal community to do this. She also, we're talking about maybe some kind of temporary or permanent installations that talk about things, could be at the library. There's just a lot to coordinate. And I think they're open to it, and I think we should be open to it. And already there's a ton of good people doing good work on this stuff. And yet it's sort of staccato, I guess is a good word for it. You've got land issues, you've got, temporary programming issues, you've got maybe a permanent, interpretive sign somewhere, who knows? There's a lot of ways that we can work together. I would finally just add that Christine Rasmussen had when folks from the Stockbridge Muncie community come out, as they did this past weekend, they stay on Sargent Street next to her. And she recounted her discussions over the past few times they visited with a grandmother who is part of that community. And both of them were talking about how great it would be to have families, host families. I talked also to Peter Dillon and mentioned the idea of a exchange program where maybe for a few weeks students could come out here or students could go into Wisconsin from here. And everybody seems interested, but there's a lot of potential ideas, and this would maybe just be a group that could, kind of keep the relationship moving strong.
Sounds like there's a lot of moving parts to this in different directions.
That's right.
It seems like.
So I just thinking we should make a small committee of 3 to 5 people. That is the focal point that everything goes through. So that things are monitored and not repeated, or this one's saying this one's saying that, and then that's when things get messed up and confusing. So
I think that someone from the library, someone from the land community, maybe someone from NOMCAG, but those are just 3 examples. I mean, obviously people would need to serve. But I think it's really important that whatever our idea is, that we reach out and build consensus on both the structure and the approach with the community in Wisconsin and with Bonnie Hartley, the local representative of the community. I think it's really important that we suggest, not dictate. You know what I mean? Of course. Yeah.
Stockbridge Library, that's.
Is that you, Wendy, or is it Talia? Hi, Wendy.
So what do you
It's
think?
me.
So what do you think about, what do you think about having that committee like of 5 members?
I think it's a wonderful idea, and I think either Talia Leodari, our curator, who has been working with the tribe consistently since she started working with us, and even prior to that, in her work at the Great Barrington Library, would be a great candidate for that. But I think someone from the library and museum would be very happy to serve on that committee, and I love the idea of a collaborative effort to build relationship.
I think if you have a center point, I think it'd be easier for communication from the tribe to the town. So they know who they're talking to, who to go to. And there's not 10 different directions of good things going on, but, repeated things stuff. What do you think, Jamie?
Yes, and I think, he's not here tonight, but maybe Rick Wilcox.
Yeah, but I think, no.
He planned to come. But
I know, but maybe he's
Yeah,
ill.
but I think,
He's not a town resident.
Oh, he's not
oh,
anymore.
that's okay. It's,
Advocate.
you don't have to be a town
But he
resident.
did work in town for a long time.
So why don't we make a decision on making a committee, and then people, like we always have to do.
What I would suggest is the first thing we do is maybe write up a paragraph or 2 on kind of the sense of what this is. I'm happy to do this with Michael and have him get it to you guys. And then I would like to take that and get it to Sherry so that she can talk to the tribal council about it and get their feedback.
Yeah.
And so before we actually name it, we basically get a sense of whether or not, because Sherry supported it, but she's not on the tribal council, as I understand it. Yeah. So she's going to need to, all decisions go through the tribal council. And so we're going to just want to give them a chance to.
Just explain, it'll be a nice center group that will be that's the group that will be talking back and forth. Right. Meeting with.
So Michael and I'll come up with a paragraph or 2, and I'll have Michael reach out to both of you and make sure that you can edit it with him. And then I think that we
vote on a future meeting.
What?
We vote on this in a future meeting.
Well, I think that we can get kind of a preliminary, idea of what we're talking about in between this meeting and the next meeting, just to get feedback from the tribe.
Yep.
And then then we'll vote on, then we'll basically open it to,
We have to open it to get people's names and take it from there.
I think it's a great solution.
I know we already got a great a group that wants to do it, that's been involved in. No, I think it's a great thing. And I think streamlining it would be a great improvement. So, not
If
repeating
anything, just
things.
to remove the opportunity of gossip.
Yes.
Well, yeah, I think.
Then when something comes up, you would report to the select board and.
Good luck with that. Good luck with
Oh, I'm
that.
sorry, let me mitigate the opportunity for gossip.
Okay, so
That's great.
let's do that.
All right. And with that, are we done?
No.
No, we need.
No. All right.
Okay, so we're gonna, well, Michael gets back, trick or treat is gonna be October 31st from 5 PM to 7 PM. So if you want people to come, turn your lights on. If you don't, turn them off and hide in the back. Halloween parade and pumpkin walk, which starts at the Red Line intersection and goes to the library, would be October 27th from 6 PM to 7:30 PM.
When is the Ice Glen walk that the
And I
fire department?
believe the Ice Glen walk is the 28th, but don't hold me to that. I think it's a Saturday after that. This is Friday. I think the Ice Glen walk's on a Saturday.
Yeah, but isn't this our last meeting? What's today?
No, we have one the 20,
We have one the 26th.
Yes.
No, that one, is that one? Yeah, we do have
yeah,
one the
that's one, we're
26th.
going to Church Street and then,
All right, I just,
Here.
yeah, okay. So, but everyone, there is an Ice Glen Walk, which hadn't happened in a while, right? And so we just, that's the kind of
I
third.
believe it's on the 28th, but we'll double check it.
All right.
And just to remind everybody, October 23rd is our special town meeting for the school. We do need.
And the senior exemption.
And senior exemption, so please attend so we can get a quorum.
And even if Egremont votes it down on the 21st, it's really important that we have our vote because we'll be in limbo if we don't. And frankly, we've got an opportunity, Michael, I hope is coming back in soon. But Michael has a plan to get the senior work off in place by January. If we're able to pass that at town meeting. So getting the senior, even if the school thing fails in Egremont and dies a quick death, or hopefully passes, I don't know, whatever. The senior work off is something that we're hoping that we get the quorum of 50, at least I'm hoping that we get the quorum of 50 people that we need, so that if anybody needs help and wants to work off up to $1,500 of their tax bill, they can.
Okay.
But maybe Michael will return.
Let me see what he's doing.
He's talking.
So how many goes up? Hey, Michael, we need you. Can you guys come back just to finish our meeting and then, we'll be like 2 more minutes. All right. Sorry.
Okay, so we decided on the Indian,
committee.
Mohegan tribe thing that you and Patrick gotta write something up to make a 5-member board,
All right,
but we want to run it by the tribe
yep.
and then bring it up at our next meeting to vote and put the name out to whoever wants to be on that.
Yep.
So we're
thing.
on
So
the-
it'll be the vocal point. Anything that happens with that will go through that committee. So it'll be one center point. And we
Right.
announced all the,
We're at Mass General Law, Chapter 60, Section 3A.
oh, I missed that one.
Yeah.
Mass General Law, Chapter 63A, Select Board approval to include the attached insert with the tax bills.
Can you put it up on the screen?
Yep. So the tax collector wants to put this notification into the tax bill, letting people know that the payment options that are currently available. Anytime, other than the tax bill, if the tax collector wants to add any other communication, they actually have to get permission from the select board. So she wishes to add this following information to the residents of the town. Tells them what they can do for online payment, for cash payments, for check and bank checks.
So this is where there's one.
This would just be a flyer that goes in it. There's also a drop box at the front door and back entrance where payments may be left after hours. So that's the entirety of what she's looking to put into the tax bill notification.
No Venmo?
No Venmo.
I would like to, I know that it's sort of on the form, but it's confusing for some folks. I would like to let folks know that they also can donate to the scholarship or donate to the senior tax, the thing where you can basically donate to the tax fund for seniors. And I think if we're going to do an insert that frankly, I think that should be we can easily fit it with that amount of text. We can easily fit it as an additional thing to just encourage people that they can donate to those two things.
All right, good. Yeah, we could, I'll double check to make sure that we can add.
Can we?
Just notification on those.
If that's possible, can we approve
possible,
it
yes.
with that change?
Yes.
Okay, so I make a motion, we approve it with that change if it's possible.
Second. What's the favor?
Aye.
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 Good. You got anything, Michael?
Nope.
Do you know when the Ice Climb Walk is?
28th, isn't it? Saturday
It
afternoon.
is.
Yes.
I will find out from Vinnie. I'll make sure it's on our website. The fire department's doing Ice Glen Walk that they did prior to COVID. It hasn't happened.
Speaking of the website, is there a reason why our calendar doesn't include events like this? Like I noticed that the Council on Aging meeting is on it, but the Council on Aging event the next week isn't on the calendar. And I was wondering why we don't basically put things like these sort of town events actually on the town calendar.
I will work on expanding the town calendar.
Yeah, I mean, it's just another list, right? Just basically, because some people just go to the calendar and, they don't know when things like this are. And I know Vinny knows when this is, and I know that he's told me and he's told you, but I'm like.
And every time you ask me,
I'm too old to remember and, you got too much in your mind. Give it 6 years, you'll be my age.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
All in favor, aye, right.